Welcome to the Land and Lead podcast, where we explore the real stories behind leadership transitions, the setbacks, strategies, wins, and moments of growth, all aimed at helping other leaders land well and lead effectively. I'm your host, Dr. Josh Elmore of Court Street Consulting. Today we're speaking with Larry Cassesa. With over 2 decades of progressive leadership experience in sales, marketing, and executive management, including more than 10 years at ABICOR BINZEL, Larry has consistently driven significant growth and spearheaded high-level change management initiatives. His career began with 7 years as a field sales representative, building foundational expertise. Just before the 2008 recession, Larry transitioned into a national sales manager role where he successfully navigated the economic recovery and built a high-performing team for a growing company. In 2014, he advanced to VP of Sales before joining ABICOR BINZEL. In 2015, as Director of Sales and Marketing. During his tenure, ABICOR BINZEL has doubled its sales, and he's expanded his responsibilities across multiple departments, ultimately taking over as president in early 2024. Beyond ABICOR BINZEL, in 2023, Larry also took on the role of managing director at Weld.com, where he successfully rebuilt the company, culminating in its sale in 2025. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. We're excited to chat about all of those different kind of roles that you took on and that ascendancy. Can you share a bit about your background and how you landed at ABICOR BINZEL?
Sure. So to start out with, I think in your introduction, you talked about it a little bit, but I started as a regional salesperson. There were 2 of us running around the country. So I got a lot of experience, a lot of exposure when I worked for this company called Superior Products. And that's where I evolved into eventually the sales manager after learning the business. So built a sales team, started from scratch, a lot of learning experiences in that, especially in the tough economic times. And then when Superior Products was acquired, I ventured outside into the unknown, so to speak, after 12 years there and took on a VP of sales role. Ultimately, I determined that the culture fit wasn't there. So I went back, and the company ABICOR BINZEL actually had some investments in Superior Products, so I knew them well. So they knew me well, and the transition was relatively easy to come into ABICOR BINZEL into this role.
And can you tell us more about the company and your journey through various roles?
Sure. So ABICOR BINZEL, when I had come in, there was a need for different leadership in the sales and marketing aspect of the business. So I came in with the intentions of looking at the company, analyzing what resources and people we currently had and how we best prepare that for the future. So my job wasn't necessarily one that everybody loves you coming in. You're an outsider into a long tenured business. So most people who are here worked for a long time, but things weren't going in a good direction. So ultimately, they wanted to bring me in for a fresh perspective, look at the staff, like I said. So coming in, I looked at that, made some changes, and a lot of the staff from 10 plus years ago is still here, and the people that we've brought in.
Wow. And so you're coming into this new role and the organization, you're a newcomer, but you were able to retain kind of folks for, you mentioned just the 10 years. What strategies did you use in those early days to kind of, walk into this challenging moment, but also find success?
So you're not really wanted by half the people who are either in the organization or working for you. You're bringing along new levels of accountability, a new direction. So you really had to determine who's on board and who's not, who's performing, who's not. So you have to take a holistic view of the situation that you're in, knowing that people are going to be adversarial along the way. Some people really accept you as they're high performers. They want to do good and they want positive change within the organization. So it's really looking at your staff and saying who's on board, who's not. How do I do this to make it better for the long term, for the future, and really get some people in who can help drive the business in a good direction towards whatever your vision may be of the organization and especially the departments that you control.
And you're coming into this organization, there's like kind of an existing challenge with the direction. How did you develop your vision? What did you where did you kind of get that inspiration?
So part of it was my past tenure. We were in the same industry, so I did know the industry pretty well for the most part, but there's always nuances within an organization. So taking time to not just understand the people, but understand the market positioning of the company, what customers are the ones that you really need to focus on, how you take this organization to the next level. So you really have to take time to learn, understand, focus on that before you start implementing and making changes. Some of the low hanging fruit of people who obviously don't fit in, you have to make those changes to build some credibility with the people who want to move the organization forward as well.
Hmm. And how do you do that? That sounds like a challenging dynamic around determining, who fits, but also identifying those folks that are going to be able to be brought along. How do you do that?
You give them time, you give them opportunities. Some people make it very clear very fast that they don't want to make the change. Some people I had a couple people who hide it well, so they tell you one thing, do another. Those people are harder to find out, for lack of better terms. But yeah, you just got to take time. You have to put energy and effort into the people to determine who's in the right positions and who you might need to change. So priority also matters. So prioritize and execute is something that I live by as well too. What are the higher priority things? What are the more impactful things? So my primary focus was on the outside sales team first because they're in direct contact with the customers, and then to focus on marketing once that is relatively set. So really to prioritize in your key areas with your key customers and making sure you have the right people in those places.
Hmm. And so, kind of thinking about, you've gone through a couple different roles. That's the role that you entered in with. Now you're in the president role. You've come through. Is it three roles?
Well, it's been an evolution. So yes. So even though my title remained the same, the amount of responsibilities has been added, stacking, I guess, over time. So the
Hmm.
things I've been involved with, I'd been given other departments that I became the head of without a title change. So I'd mentioned the product managers all reported to me, the engineers. So other departments started reporting to me, got involved with the manufacturing side of the business as well too, as you slowly build into this role.
And so, as that scope changed, but there wasn't necessarily a formal change, how did you manage the way that people received you in being that new person that was taking on those functions?
So the gradual changes were easy because those needed attention anyway. So I was given that and people were familiar with me. So those ones are easier. The transition when the title change comes to be president of ABICOR Binzel USA, you will get some people who start being a little bit more reserved with you. They start pulling back a little bit because now the title carries clout, even though the responsibilities haven't changed immensely. So some people will be a little bit more hesitant to speak with you openly. So especially in departments where you're not as familiar with them, or like they weren't the main departments I was involved with. So in production and things like that, they're usually a little bit more reserved to talk to you. Whereas the people who had worked for me in sales for years, that nothing really changed with those. So in order to manage that, it's just spending time with them, building trust, and you're not going to get to everybody within the organization, obviously. So you're going to lose some of that touch with the people who are doing the day to day. But to be heavily reliant on your managers and talking with them, helping them sort things out, getting a comfort level with them. But some of the people who are in different roles that are more in the day to day, they definitely do pull back. So to try to connect with them personally, if there is some things that you need to work with them on.
And so, right, so your scope increased, and so the folks that were reporting to you, then that headcount increased, and you're speaking to this idea of not being able to get access to everyone to get that pulse on the organization, the same way that you built those relationships with the sales organization. You mentioned managers as being kind of your conduit to those other organizations' product, for instance. How do you kind of structure your relationships with your managers so that you can have a productive conduit?
It's constant communication. First off, so by constant communication, I mean going over things at least once a week with them. Where are things at? So some sort of conversation, whether it's formal or informal. And with the managers too, I've established a senior manager meeting where we monthly review everything that's happening. So everybody gets a chance to talk. I have them focus on macro sort of things. So I don't want to get in the nuances of the day to day that they're running into. This person's calling off a lot, but rather the macro, what's going on with this department. So I usually lead it off with even bigger, the economic. What are the economic factors that are driving some of the things that are impacting our business? Where do I foresee that going? So we're having open communications, and then the overall direction of the company. Where are we at with the KPIs, the numbers that drive the organization, like the profit? I run through all of that. Then the managers get a chance to communicate across departments as well too, to be able to understand maybe what some other department or what other constraints. So the biggest benefit to that is my sales team now hears what's happening with production and challenges that they're having. So it isn't this mysterious sort of, well, production's not performing because I'm out in the field and product's not coming out. The sales managers now have a better understanding of what's going on in the whole organization, so they can relate to their people and make better decisions as well.
And speaking to this idea of implementing cross-functional team touch points, do you have like a tangible example of kind of a win that came from having those cross-functional monthly meetings?
Sure, tons of them, but the general example I gave is probably the best thing. So you start getting animosity from sales because they're promising customers things and production isn't delivering. So now my sales team understands that. And people in production understand that right now people aren't buying capital goods. Like, well, okay, we have this inventory of these capital products. They're not turning. What's going on? Is our sales team not performing? It's like, well, not really, but they're being told by their customers they're holding on for longer. So some of those things are definite big wins when it comes to keeping everybody focused on what they need to be focused on and understanding what's going on in other parts of the business for sure.
So that contextual awareness and
Yeah,
keeping people up to speed.
correct.
Yeah. And then kind of just going back to the idea of as you take on more in terms of your scope, your mindset had to change, your focus had to change to that broader level. And how do you, right? You're helping other people to kind of take that next level view. How did you yourself get to a point for where you were comfortable or the realization that you needed to kind of level up to that next perspective for the organization?
So I'm a big advocate of continuous learning. So constantly reading books, preparing myself, setting my mindset in the right path as well too. So podcasts, other forms of stimulation and things I should be thinking about, things I should be doing. I have a network of friends as well too that I can bounce ideas off of, people who maybe have been through some things similar to me, other executives, where I can ask them some questions and say, okay, what's going on here? A case recently was I called one of my good friends, and he's in a different industry. And I was just discussing with him some of the legal things. It's like, well, what should I do with this? This is outside the scope of anything that I've encountered. We're running into some possible legal HR things. What do you think? And in getting that feedback from him really helped me understand, okay, take it slow, make sure that you're following all the rules that you need to, and here's what we do when it comes to those sorts of issues. And just remember that the employee probably has the advantage, so just make sure that they're taken care of in this situation as well too, and that you're cognizant of this and this. So it's like, okay, so as opposed to just going out and saying, I'm going to figure this out on my own, having that resource was great to help me get in the right mind frame and understanding of what to do and potential outcomes and all that stuff.
And so it's kind of this idea of that shared network for going through the same challenges, kind of like what this podcast is, right? Where we're
Right.
sharing stories for other folks to learn from and get some advice on. So, thinking about your current role, what are some wins that you found that were maybe different from the past roles, but is it related specifically to your transition, right? You're coming into the role, you're taking it on. What did you see as like a win as it related to your transition?
I guess before I really get into that, one of the things that I haven't really touched on is that this role now is also, we're also bringing multiple different companies together at the same time right now. So not only am I stepping into this role of leading ABICOR Binzel USA, we also have other stakeholders because there are three companies that are coming together, and over the next 3 to 5 years will be one organization. So the biggest win that we're having is when we're getting to spots where we find the right people to help bring this together and move towards the new bigger version of the goal, and working cross-functionally with the president down at the other major company that's coming together, and really finding solutions to some of these bigger problems and issues between organizations. So honestly, I love coming together with them and talking about how do we do this. I always joke that I think that we're on the 50th version of the org chart as we start figuring more things out. It's like, oh, this person would be great for this role. Let's see how it looks with this person in this role, and constantly shuffling pieces. So we're coming to a point where a lot of the stuff's becoming a lot more clear. So these big wins of finding these people, these roles where we can really positively affect the company's performance is some of the bigger things that we're doing for sure.
And right, so thinking about this, that's a transition in and of itself, right? Because in your role as president, you started early 2024. That's kind of you're a year and a half into the president role, but now you have these mergers that are happening, and you're working with these other organizations and their leadership teams. So you would say that's like an organization transition, but you also have to be a new leader on behalf of Abicor Binzel. Are you going to be kind of the ultimate leader of these three organizations? Is that the idea?
I'm not sure 100% how that's gonna roll out. We're still looking at those things, if it's better because we have 2 major companies, how we pull that together. So that's still in dialogue, but how we pull this whole thing together from the top, we've done a sort of division of responsibilities. The other president is much better at the finance side, the HR. So we divided the teams into strengths for both of us as well, but the communications also very good between the two of us for sure. So it allows us to work through these issues and saying, okay, these are my strengths. How should we handle this, and work through those issues together. But as far as one head of this organization together, we're not certain of how that will look when this is all said and done in 3 years, for sure.
Yeah. And just speaking to this idea of, right, you're in this new context, you're in it, you're in that moment right now. And how are you navigating that need to introduce yourself and the way that you're leading across these new units that you are now kind of being involved with in terms of your leadership?
So the biggest theme along my whole career is you are an agent of change. So at least for me personally, that's I've come into these roles and you're an agent of change. We're going here, we're changing this, we're doing that. So there are plenty of times where you're seen as the enemy. I mentioned it earlier coming into sales where not everybody is your biggest fan because you're disrupting their comfort lifestyle, so to speak. So same thing is happening now is there's people within these organizations who necessarily don't see you positively. So there's a lot of things you have to do to at least earn their trust and respect. So you're asking them to change what they're doing, how they're doing it, who they report to, maybe scope of work even. So it becomes difficult over time to just do that without actually engaging and spending time with the people. So going out there, spending time with them, getting on calls, but just know that you're not going to please everybody as the leader. You do have to take that bigger scope into where we're going into effect. And much as before, the people who don't want to get on board, you have to decide how to handle that. Either reassign them. I've done that successfully, taken somebody who was the leader of a department and moved them into an individual contributor role. But it's really about getting the right people in the right places. And sometimes they're not happy with those decisions, but they're not going to be successful in maybe the role that they're in now. Again, not everybody likes you when you're going through this. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's actually one of the better practices in change management, this idea of instead of like pursuing layoffs, how can you reassign folks to something that's going to better fit their strengths given where the organization is headed? Is that your normal strategy?
Absolutely. So people we've had in the organization, this has happened multiple times. We give them opportunities, possibly in other roles, but I communicate with them openly and honestly, even if it's not what they want to hear at the time. So we've taken a gentleman in marketing, reassigned him to the product team, and he's doing well in it. But at the time, we needed to make a change in marketing. It necessarily wasn't, his performance, but we needed a new leadership change. So we brought that person in, and this was the person that we thought could be better in a more technical product based role. So we slid him over there and said, the marketing, this. We already have the experience with the organization, the understanding of the culture. He's a fit that way. Let's see if it can work if we put him in this department, and it worked out. But multiple times we've done this with people, and I've had people who have come from outside the organization who work for us now in managerial positions, and they're like, this is great. The fact that you will give somebody an opportunity in another role. So we try to promote from within when we can, for sure.
Yeah, super powerful. So thinking about, right, so those are some wins as it relates to kind of you coming into a new role and kind of pursuing change, but also helping people manage it for themselves. Any setbacks as it relates to your transitions? What were some challenges that you ran into, and how did you overcome them?
The biggest setbacks is when you have a key manager who's fighting the change or fighting you along the way. So as you're going through this and you have somebody in a position over other people and they're highly talented, they're very good at what they do, but they're fighting you along the way. And when we talk about that lip service, that yeah, we'll do that, but then they walk away and they do whatever they want anyway. So those are typically the biggest setbacks that we get when it comes to people, setbacks with the economy currently and how things are going. It makes it very difficult to maneuver when you're in an environment where part of your products, your capital equipment, isn't moving the way that you plan to because the economy is different than you thought it would be, based off of, as we, move through this, tariffs, interest rates, all this stuff affects the ability to sell capital equipment or people wanting to buy that.
So, thinking about kind of your role, current president role, you've been in it since early 2024, and thinking about the idea of taking charge in that role and in the assignment, getting your resources to work as effectively as they can, efficiently as they can, and your ability to be a leader in that role and show up as best you can. And so we're going to think about that and use this definition from John Gabbro in the 1980s. He ran a few studies focused on general managers and presidents as they pursued new roles and wrote the results in the book, The Dynamics of Taking Charge. Gabbro explained that an executive is fully taken charge when they've mastered the new assignment in sufficient depth to be managing the organization as efficiently as the resources, constraints, and the manager's own ability will allow. So, thinking about this definition, where 100% is having fully taken charge of the new assignment, what percent would you say you are now in your president role?
I would say, as far as being in control, for sure, it's probably higher, 95%. Having feeling like I have control over what's happening. But at the same time, there's so much rapid change. I'm learning so many things I didn't expect I needed to know. So as you're going through this, you're being presented with new challenges, new difficulties where maybe you didn't expect it or you don't have experience as well too. So from a leadership perspective, I do feel like that I have a good hold or good control of the company, and its resources for sure, and driving that in a good direction. But there's always new things and new information popping in where you have to make adjustments in areas maybe you didn't know you had to.
And thinking about kind of our whole conversation today and what we covered, is there something that you're thinking about as it relates to your transition that we didn't get to cover?
The biggest thing is honestly the difficulty of change management, and knowing that, especially a lot of managers like to be liked, and whether it's president or department managers, they like to have a positive experience within the team, but also to be able to handle the tasks and the things that need to be done for the long term. So sometimes having a long-term focus and looking at things from a perspective is like, okay, is this what we're doing today? What's best for the company? And those difficult decisions when you're in the middle of it, those are some of the hardest things for sure to manage, to sleep at night, that knowing that it's like, okay, do I have this in the right direction? One of the best little snippets I've heard was there were a couple managers where the company wasn't doing well, and they asked themselves, if we fired ourselves today and hired ourselves tomorrow, what would we change and what would we do? So when you come into these roles, it's constantly evaluating, are we doing the right things? Is this what's best? I'm getting information how do I process this to make sure that the company's going in the right direction? Do I need to make changes that may be uncomfortable as well too? So the change management is very difficult as people are involved for sure, but to really look at it and say, are we doing the right things? Are we going the right direction?
And what's your best way to know or to assess whether or not you're doing the right things or going in the right direction?
Much of what I said is that, okay, I have this information. Am I too emotionally close to it to make a good decision? So if I were removed from that, or as I'd said, if you're fired today and they hire you tomorrow, what are you going to look at? And you're never going to have all the answers. Don't believe that you do, but to try to pull back and say, you know what, these are some hard decisions, but we have to make some moves. And it starts with talking to the managers, getting them on the same page. What do we need to do? For me, fortunately, I do have a good team of people where we can separate ourselves from, yeah, I really like this person, but they're not performing. So let's start them down a process of letting them know that they need to do better. Start there, move from there. But they're one of your longer time employees, but they're not performing the way that they should, as opposed to it's like, well, they've been with us 20 years. 5 years from now, am I better off by keeping this person or not? So really involving the people that are around them as well too, to make sure that your train of thought, if taken just all by itself without the emotions, is possibly some moves or some discussions you need to have for sure.
So I hear kind of just being really thoughtful about how you manage your folks.
Correct. The people are the center of the organization for sure. So you have to be cognizant of that and constantly take that into consideration as you're making your business decisions as well too. Know that there are emotional human beings who are driving your organization. They're the reason your team, your company is successful, regardless if you have the best product or not. These are the people who are driving the organization. So keeping that in mind as you're moving through this as well. Do I have the right people on the bus? Are they continuously driving? Have they lost their way a little bit? Sometimes it's just a matter of bringing it back into focus for them. That I know times are tough. It's frustrating out there, but to remember that your organization is composed of people, and that's what drives it for sure.
Super powerful. So, kind of final thought here. What advice would you share with leaders currently entering new high stakes roles?
Take your time to really understand it. And by take your time, I mean take an analytical look at where you're at and what you have in your bucket, your resources, your team, and try to take a good evaluation of that. Typically, when I came into ABICOR Binzel, everything's fresh and new. I have no emotional relationships with anybody. That's easy. So I can come in here and it's like, oh, well, this is easy. This person doesn't work. That person doesn't. But coming through Benzel, being here 10 and a half years now, and you move into a different role, you do have emotional attachments with people. So to make sure that you're taking that time to really understand and evaluate from that perspective of the organization as well too, while understanding and balancing the fact that these people were successful in some way, shape, or form before. Can you get them back to there?
What you have here is this idea that the organization has been a success for some reason, right? And there's a rationale for that. There's a past context in which it worked. And so, how do you help them meet the new context so that they can update the way that they do things and make it work?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, Larry, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your wisdom with other leaders. It's a really powerful message you got there.
Thanks for having me. I always enjoy sharing the experiences that hopefully it's able to give somebody else some insight and some ideas in how they can handle something that they're going through at that time.
Thanks so much for listening to the Land and Lead podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Josh Elmore. Tune in next time for more stories from leaders navigating high stakes role transitions.